Hello and welcome to my third quick guidance study. This one is going to focus on models. So normally I always usually run at least two models at a time. Let me just kind of show you my sort of default setup is I'll have these first three and the RN50. Whoops, uncheck that. Okay, so I'll have the VIT-B32, the 16, the 14, and usually the RN50, but I do use some different ones, and I will usually also have this secondary model unchecked. And I'm showing you an image now of a render I just did, and I will paste the prompt there below. But what I'm going to do now, normally you're always going to be using at least two models. I'm just going to kind of run these one at a time, though, to kind of show you the flavor of each model and which kind of models to avoid because of memory issues, which is basically just this one, this 336. I've actually never been able to get this one to run even with a Colab Pro Plus account and the V100. I think you need the A100 to get it to run. If anyone has got this to run, please post it in the comments, or better yet, show me a link of what you made with it. I've heard this is actually one of the best models, but it takes a ton of memory to run. And the 64 is kind of the same story. You can run that. I have run this before, but it takes up a lot of memory, and I just don't think it's worth it. I think this actually the VidL 14 is usually the best model. I always like to have that there in the mix somewhere. But right now, we're going to first run just this first one. So the models will take up more memory the further you go down, and then it'll restart when it gets to the RNs. So from the VIT-B32 to the 14336 here, this is low and then higher. And so I'm going to start with kind of the lowest memory model here. So this will probably be the crudest render we get. So I'm going to go ahead now and start this up, and I'll go ahead and post my prompt and everything down below as well. I've got 200 steps, just a clip guidance scale of 1500. And let's see here. And I also have a low cut and batch here. I just have a one cut and batch, and I have pretty low a cut schedule as well. This is going to be my next quick studies tutorial. Right now I'm just doing three outer cuts, one inner cut, and then that reverses. And I do have the seed in here as well, which I will post down below. It's 281390318. This should give us kind of similar renders on each one. And here's my prompt, a Blade Runner building in a grass field by Bierstadt Albert and Elizabeth Gadd. And then I've got Smart Station and Unreal Engine modifiers there with weights. But let's go ahead and do the run here, and we'll come and check on it when this is done. Okay, and our render is finished up now. And you can see this is a pretty crude, really kind of a rough looking image here. And that's kind of to be expected. Right now we have it on pretty much the absolute lowest settings you could have. So we've got the lowest memory model and we have the secondary model turned on. So I'm now going to do this run again, but this time we're going to uncheck the secondary model just to see what that does. That does use up a little more memory too when you do this, but it will give it a little more detail. Okay, and our render is finished. Now you see now, even though we're using that same low memory model by unchecking that secondary model, we've got a lot better render here. And it is turned on by default, so that is something I do recommend unchecking as often as you can. It will take up more memory, but it'll improve your render quite a bit. So that was the VIT B32 we just tested, both with the secondary model on and off. So we'll go ahead now and move on to the next one, the VIT B16. So each of these different models will kind of give your image a little bit of a different flavor. And normally you won't ever just run one. You'll usually have two mixed together, but I'm going to go ahead and run this one now, the VIT B16 with the secondary model turned on, and we'll come and check this when it is done. Okay, our next render is finished up again, and you see with that secondary model checked on, it still looks a bit crude. We'll go ahead now and uncheck it and run this again. Okay, and our next render is winding down. You see it does look a little better. It still doesn't look great, and I would normally ever just run one model. I'm just kind of showing you the different flavors that these can give you. So mixing and matching them is always pretty good. Okay, and our next render is winding down here. It's actually pretty foggy. You can see though it definitely has a different flavor than the other models. So each model will kind of give its own distinctive kind of look to whatever you're rendering. So that is one thing to be aware of. There might be some models that are better for some things. Like for example, the RN50 by 16 is really good for 3D kind of effects. Like if you want to do something rendered in Unreal Engine. That kind of gives things a really good kind of depth to them usually. Okay, the render is winding down here. Again, this is the VitL14 with the secondary model turned off. So that's a really kind of an almost photorealistic look there to this scene. So you can see why I like this model. It usually does pretty good no matter what you throw at it. It really handles things well. And yeah, that's kind of an interesting looking scene there. I wasn't really expecting it to look that photoreal with this prompt and everything. Let's go ahead now and go to the next one. Okay, now run here with the RN101 here as completed, and this is what we got here. It's still kind of, and I'm using the same seed for all of these, so it should be rendering pretty similar scenes for all these. Okay, and this is the RN101 with the secondary model turned off. So you see it definitely looks different than any of the renders we've got. So this is one you might want to just throw in just to see what kind of results you get, just depending on what you're doing. Okay, and this is our RN50 with the secondary model turned on. And now let's go ahead and run it with it turned off. Okay, and this render, this is the RN50 with the secondary model unchecked. Okay, and here we've got the RN50 by 4 with the secondary model turned on. Let's go ahead and do a run now with it turned off. Okay, and we've got the RN50 winding down now. I think this is the RN50 by 4. Yeah, this one's the RN50 by 4 with a secondary model turned off. Okay, we're back, and if you'll see, this introduced like a lot of different elements, like the ground's a different color, but it also has this kind of terminal thing. So that's what I mean by you can experiment around with models, and it'll give your render a different flavor. Okay, and here's our RN50 by 16 with the secondary model turned off. There again's that kind of depth of field I was talking about. Okay, and here is our RN50 by 64. You can see there's some new elements. Each of these models will give it a different look. Let's go ahead now and run this with the secondary model turned off. Okay, and here is our RN50 by 64 with the secondary model turned off, and that also gives like kind of a really good 3D effect. But you can see now just going through these 6 models now. Actually, that's 7 now. We've gone through 7 models now. We've gone through all of these except for this one, the 336, and I've never been able to get that one to work. So let me just do one or two quick more. I'm actually going to do something here that I have not done yet. So let's go into uncharted territory here. I've actually never used these open clip settings yet, and I'm not sure what's going to happen here. Let's find out. And this is the way I've found out, a lot of the stuff just by doing these kind of experiments. So we'll just try this one here. This is the VitB32 and then a bunch of letters and numbers. I've got it turned off. We'll just go ahead and leave the secondary model off on our first one. Okay, so this one is now finished up now, and let's do it one more time now with the secondary model. Oh, that was with the secondary model turned off. Oh, yeah, that's right. Okay, so what I'm guessing is that these are some kind of variation of this. So this is the VitB32, and then this says VitB32, and then it has these after. So I'm not going to go through all these. I'll go ahead and do a image comparison too. Now that I've got this one, I'll compare it here to the one that I did with this. But I do get a little bit lazy with these. Like this is something you don't really want to change a whole lot when you're doing sessions, just because it has to load the models each time. So let me just kind of show you my normal kind of default go-to, and I would just come up with one for yourself or whatever kind of images you're making. And I also have another one I use for animations that doesn't include this, just so it can render them a bit quicker, that kind of thing. But usually I do something like this. Like I'll have these first 3 and this one, the RN50, and the secondary model turned off. So I'm just going to do one final render here with all of these. So you can do all kinds of combinations here. Just remember, each new model you add does take up more memory. So you got to go by your memory limits in your Google Colab account. But we'll go ahead and do one final run here with the VitB32, the 16, and the VitL14, and the RN50. And the secondary model turned off. We'll come back and check on that. Okay, and here's my final render now with kind of my default setup. And so you can see the models can make a drastic change in how your image turns out. So this is just supposed to be kind of a quick study on these things. So I just kind of wanted to show you the effect of what changing those models does, in particular turning that secondary model off. And all of these things do take memory. So actually turning off the secondary model takes more memory. So that's kind of a counterintuitive thing to understand. So that's something I wanted to point out as well. And the more models you have loaded up there, the more memory your Colab is going to be taken up. But thank you very much for watching this. My next quick studies, which should be out within a day or two, is going to be kind of a continuation on the cut and batch, and it's going to deal with the cut schedules. I also started a Patreon page, and my weeklies, as always, will be up Sunday. Thank you for watching. See you soon.